So now we know how to identify the vertex, the axis of symmetry, how the parabola is going to open, and its min and max. So we're going to put all of this together and graph our parabola. So in this problem, I have x squared plus 2x subtract 1. And I am going to identify the a, the b, and the c. So my a is 1, my b is 2, and my c is negative 1. So right off the bat, I can identify at least which way this is going to open. So by looking at a, I have a positive 1, so that means that this parabola will open upward. And since it is open upward, that means I'm going to have a minimum value. Remember, if our a was negative, it would open down and you would have a maximum value. Now I can go through and begin to find my vertex. So to find the vertex, remember I have to use the formula negative b divided by 2 times a. My b term is 2, so I'm going to plug in a negative 2, and in the denominator I'm going to have 2 times 1. 2 times 1 is 2, so I have negative 2 divided by 2, which gives us an x-coordinate of negative 1. So I can fill in negative 1 for the x-coordinate of my vertex. And then remember the axis of symmetry goes through that x-coordinate as well. So we can already write in that our axis of symmetry is x equals negative 1. Now let's finish the vertex by plugging in our negative 1 to the problem. So I'm going to have the quantity of negative 1 squared plus 2 times negative 1 subtract 1. You can plug that into the calculator and get your y-coordinate. So I get a y-coordinate of negative 2. So my vertex is at negative 1, negative 2. Now that I have my y-coordinate, I can also find my min and max value. So I'm going to have my minimum to be at negative 2 as well. Okay, so the last thing that we have is our domain and range, and let's fill in the table and graph, and then we'll come back to our domain and range last. Your vertex wants to go in the middle of our table, so I'm going to put in negative 1, negative 2 to the middle of our table. The x's on the top are going to get filled in like a number line. So I'm going to go bigger than negative 1, and I'm going to go smaller. So 2 numbers that are bigger than negative 1 are 0 and positive 1. And then 2 that are smaller are negative 2 and negative 3. Now I can fill in the rest of the table by either plugging each one of those x's into the equation to get the y-coordinate, or I can go into the calculator, graph the function, and then go to the table and fill in the y-coordinates that I get. So you have 2 options to proceed. So I found my y-coordinates. So now I'm going to plot my 5 points to sketch in my parabola. Once you get all your points, connect them and make sure your parabola is U-shaped. We want to have curves and no straight lines. Okay, now that we have our graph, we can fill in the domain and range. So the domain of a function are the x values, and the range of a function are the y values. The domain is going to deal with any x that I can put in to my function. So if I'm looking at my graph, I want to visualize this going off into space, and I want it to go off the grid. So if I look, my u keeps expanding outward and upward. So there is absolutely no x in this number system that's not going to work. So every x is going to have a y-coordinate, even if it's off into the hundreds and thousands, but it will have a point. So we say that our domain is going to be all real numbers. And to abbreviate writing all real numbers, we make an R with an extra line going up and down. Now our range is a little different. So remember, your y's are all of the inputs. So if I look at my graph and I'm going down my y-axis, I get to my vertex and it stops. I don't have any y-coordinate that is lower than a negative 2. If I look at negative 3 and negative 5 and negative 9, I don't have any graph down below there. So my range is always either going to start at my vertex or it's going to stop at my vertex, depending on if my parabola is going upward or if my parabola is going downward. Since my parabola is going upward, all of my y-coordinates got bigger than that vertex point. So since my y at my vertex was negative 2, all of my other y's need to be bigger than or equal to that -2. So when you're doing these problems, your domain is always going to be all real numbers. There's always going to be an x that works. And your range is always going to be dependent on your vertex. And the inequality sign is going to be dependent on whether it is opening upward or whether it is opening downward.